And we'll give it a minute to make sure we're live.
Okay.
All right, looks good. Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Welcome back to the JCPS Digital Learning Channel. I'm Stephen Durham with the Digital Innovation Team, and I'm here with Summer, who is going to be talking to us about Edmentum for middle school and high school. Summer, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. I can't believe that we are here. Like the light is at the end of the tunnel for sure now.
Yes, definitely.
Alrighty, well, I'm going to just jump right in and talk to everybody about Edmentum today and all of the great uses. And I would encourage teachers to start thinking about next school year. So this time of year, it always feels good to, kind of wrap up and check in with our students, especially now that we're doing that virtually. And then obviously, I think teachers, a lot of us.
Summer, I think you froze up on us for a second. All right, you're back.
Okay, let me know. Okay, I have a full signal, so hopefully we'll be okay.
Yeah, you're good.
So I was just talking about Edmentum and all the groups with the many people and students in the district that were using it, and it's really going to be a great resource moving into next school year. We have several PDs planned, and those will go up shortly, and I hope that you can join us virtually, and maybe we'll be able to get one in person right before the school year starts. So I'm just going to jump in here and start sharing my screen and just show you some of the ins and outs of the program. All right. So when you log in, everybody that's using Edmentum logs in through Clever, and then there is the black E with this type of rainbow, and you click on that, and then you will be in. Today, I'm logged in as an instructor because I feel like that's the most beneficial for the people that would be watching and might want instruction. So you have these choices up here. This landing page, if you have students who have worked on things, will show you alerts if something needs to be graded or an assignment needs unlocked or a student finishes something. Those alerts would come up here. And over here, the purple Help Center, this button is great. And it changes, the help topics in here change based on the program, the page that you're on, so that you have different options. The how-to tours are great because they will give you little bubbles and guide you through. And then the resources will show you what can you do from this page. So you can create announcements from here, things that are ready to score, things like that. So always keep in mind if you're struggling with something or you have a question, try looking over here at the Help Center and see if that will answer your question. So we're going to jump right into courseware today. And when you hover over courseware, your school will be here. So mine is just an Edmentum training class. And once you're here, any of your students or classes, the sections that you've already created are going to show up here if it's from courseware. Keep in mind, if you're doing anything with flex assignments, that's up here, and I will show you that next. So as you can see, I have several active sections right now, and my students are all off pace because they're just students that we threw in there. They're not live or real students, but this is where I can see and check in on all of my classes. The features that you can look at from here are you can click directly on the class, and this will take you to your students and their progress. You can also go to your gradebook from here. And this has a lot of details. Obviously, when students are completing the work, it all shows up in here. This red line here is something that I omitted. So that will not show up for anybody and it won't count against anybody. Once we're in here, we could change our settings. We could go to the reports. There are many different reports that I think might be really beneficial for teachers who use this through NTI. There's the gradebook report card. You can export that, and then there's a summary for the category. So each category that's within here. You can also go to individual students here. Maybe you just want a report card for this one student. Maybe a parent sent you an email and just wanted to know how their student was doing or what it looks like. You can run these reports as many times as you want. So some people like to wait till the very end. You can do that. It's whenever you have set your end date for your students, you can do it prior to that or after.
So Summer, I haven't seen this question in the chat yet, but I'm sure it's coming. How would teachers use this as far as getting the grades into Infinite Campus? How would you recommend they do this? Because that's always one of the questions I have. Like, I wish it just put the grades in automatically, and I know it doesn't do that, but how would you recommend them do their grading, get it to Infinite Campus?
That's a really great question, and I've had that question several times in the past. People want it to be, to just like jump right into Infinite Campus or have it be fully integrated. But we have to remember that they're two different platforms.
Right.
Edmentum is a program and a platform that has your courseware, flex assignments. They also own Study Island and ExactPath. Infinite Campus is completely separate. So what I would recommend, and what I did as a teacher, I would put your grades are going to generate in this grade book based on what your students would do. I would then export that and just have a copy for myself. I always like to save a copy. And then you can transfer the grades on your own right into Infinite Campus, just like if back in the day you were a teacher and you had your red grade book and you hand wrote everything in, it would be just like then adding it to whatever platform. I know a lot of teachers in other districts I've worked in have used Schoology, and Schoology doesn't transfer over to Infinite Campus. So you would just print out that report or have it available, and then you would just go through and add it into Infinite Campus. So that's a really good question. You could use each of the categories in any way that you want, how it works for the way your grade book is set up. It's really customizable to how it works for you and your students.
Okay, great. That sounds good.
Yep, that's a great question. So that feature's right up here. There's several different ways that you can get to your grade book. And I'll show you other ways too to find some of the reports, because I feel like that's kind of where we're at. If you want to look at the curriculum, things are wrapping up. We have a little more than a week left. So maybe you've put your whole class into courseware and you want to check the progress, and maybe you just didn't get as far as you wanted to. You could come down and omit different things or lock things, or maybe you just want to unlock an end of semester test and have your students, make sure that every student's taking that end of semester test prior to the year being done. So this page is fantastic throughout the course. Obviously, right in the beginning, when you add students to this course, you can go in and update or change any of the curriculum settings, but it's something that you can do all the way through. That's what I love about the program. Nothing's set in stone. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to mess it up, or I don't want to make a mistake. You really can't, because you can always come in and make changes. As you can see right here, last saved. So I made a change on April 6th at 2:00. So I can come back in here now and continue to make changes. Maybe I locked something that I want to unlock. So this is really a fluid program that gives you a lot of autonomy. And I really appreciate that they allow you to make changes and updates. So if you click on the curriculum settings, this is where you can do a lot of those tasks for the whole course. Let's say you want to omit all discussion questions. Just hit all and it will lock all of them. Maybe you want to omit all teacher graded. So that means anything that's left in the program, which there's a lot, it will be scored by Edmentum, and that will automatically generate right into your gradebook as your students finish. We can also lock our mastery tests, pre-test, post-test, and then our end of semester tests. I know a lot of teachers have locked that end of semester test. So now might be a good time to unlock all of those so that you can, just encourage your students to keep working, keep moving. And the end of semester test is really important to gauge how well they did throughout the course. So another quick option down here is when you omit, not omit, I'm sorry, I want to save those changes. when you go to unlock mastery test, so we can always edit this. When you first put a section in, it's going to be at unlimited. And what that means is when your students go and take a mastery test, they could take it as many times as they want, and it'll just keep resetting for them. We recommend that you set it to 2 or 3 attempts. And the reason why we recommend that is if your student is taking a mastery test, that's what they would take after a tutorial and going through a lesson. Okay, so if you look at Unit 1 here, they have a pre-test, there's a discussion that we did omit that, but then understanding fiction, context and fiction, they go through this tutorial and then they take a mastery test. If they continue to fail that mastery test, it's a great alert for teachers to know, I need to check in with them. What are they missing? Is something, just not firing off in the tutorial? They also have the option to always go back through the tutorial. So I just like that feature and setting that limited attempts to 2 or 3, because it's a good alert for the teacher to know who's struggling and who's not struggling. If they get an 80, they automatically move on. If they have a 60, you can move them on, because that's, 60 is passing in JCPS. So that's, a lot of different choices that you can do with the mastery test, unlike the post-test or the pre-test, things like that. A pre-test, they have 1 attempt to do that, and they take a pre-test and they could be exempt from certain materials. Sometimes a teacher may not want their students to take a pre-test because they want them to go through the whole course. That's a choice too. So just to keep in mind, now that we're wrapping up, what does your course look like? How are your students progressing? And do you need to make any changes prior to next week? You can always come into your curriculum settings and make those changes. So let's see here. Another great feature, when you are in your course section, you can send a message. This would go to every student enrolled in the class, and it would go to their message inbox on Edmentum. I do get this question a lot. Is it linked with our JCPS email or the student's email? And it is not. So a lot of teachers that started using this after or during NTI, we had them link a how-to video on their Google Classroom or however they were communicating with their students. And those videos are still an option to put on your Google Classroom. You may even put a message on there, hey, check your Edmentum messages. This is a great way to connect with the students. But I just always want to point out that this does not go to their JCPS student email or a teacher email. This is strictly through courseware and the Edmentum program. You can also click on a student's name and you can check their progress individually. And you can also send that student what you call a quick message. So if I do a quick message, it's only going to go to that student whose page that I'm on. So that's another great option if you see that maybe somebody hasn't been progressing. You want to send them a quick message, give them a little boost or a little reminder, a little positive heads up, like, hey, come on, let's get moving. This is another great way to do that. Obviously, your students would have, plenty of this work done if they've been working through this through NTI. You see this pacing here, it's getting really close because I set an end date that is, that's why that pacing is so close.
So Summer, as far as the communication part of it, so there'd be no problem like sending a message out through Google Classroom, hey, check your Edmentum classroom for a new message. So that would be the way they would communicate, right?
Absolutely, okay. For sure. Some teachers I know they were using Edmentum prior to NTI, so their students may automatically know to check their messages.
Yes.
And they will see that message alert when they log on to Edmentum. But for some of the teachers that are using Google Classroom and Edmentum, I think that's a great option to just remind them to, get on, check it. And you can also use Google Classroom if that's the platform that you're comfortable with and your students are checking in on, to just set any types of those reminders or, even, hey, our Edmentum course is due by May 26th. So yes, you can definitely, use those interchangeably. But I just always want to stress that will not go directly to their JCPS email.
Okay.
Alrighty. So another thing too, you can always add students. So, if you're using this next year and you have a student that transfers in, or comes from a different school, you can come here and search for that student's name and add them in, which I think is a great option. If they were at another school in Jefferson County and they were already working at a course in Edmentum, you could add them and then apply all of their past progress, which I think is a great feature. And I know students and parents really appreciate, because they don't want to lose all that hard work that they've, been working on prior to switching schools. You can also come in and change the section settings at any time. So here you can see I have an end date of May 29th. I could add an instructor here, and then I could add any description that I want to set. And I can also deactivate the section. I am meeting with our Edmentum reps this week, and they're going to tell me all about what it looks like for deactivating for the end of the school year and how to wrap everything up. So I will definitely create a video and make sure that that is linked. And maybe I can even jump on the learning channel here again at the end of the week if possible. So just keep that in mind, that there are different house cleaning type things similar to Infinite Campus when you're just kind of wrapping up. But don't worry, it's not all just going to go away. May 29th, everything's going to go away. That is not the case. Your work will still be there, your students will be there, and you will be able to check their progress and print all of those reports.
That's good to hear. We've heard from a lot of teachers that, they kind of, just because we have a specific end date on this, we know everything's been kind of different. So if it's the last day of school and a student still has work they're trying to catch up on, we don't want to deny them that ability to catch up. Some teachers have talked to us about that through using Google Classroom. They wanted to make sure it wasn't going to get shut off on the last day of school, and it's not, and it's good to hear Edmentum won't either.
Right. And that's a really good concern. And myself as a teacher, I would have wanted to know, can my students keep working? They can. And you can change, like I said, you could change that end date if you wanted. Maybe you want to make it June 5th, just to, get your students a little bit more time. And there are those situations, sometimes we have to go case by case, student by student to see, who needs that additional support. Or, I always tell teachers, we have to really keep in mind what's going on in these students' lives. Our lives are super busy and hectic, teaching from home and doing all of this work from home. And then we have our children here working on their schoolwork. So we're teaching our own children that maybe none of us ever done. So our students are also helping out at home, taking care of younger siblings, or maybe they have another job. So it's always good. And I know that our teachers have been really good about that and flexible. And it's another reason why I love this platform, because students can work at any time of the day or night. We often had students throughout the school year, once they would start working on here, a teacher would realize wow, they do more through Edmentum than they did in my class. Some just naturally enjoy working online. Two
True.
of my own children prefer virtual learning versus in class. So, everybody's unique to that. And some students are night owls and work better at 2 a.m. when their house is quiet, or maybe they only have one computer in their home. So that's when they have access to it. So I do really appreciate that the kids can work on that. And I always stress to teachers, don't give your lessons or your classes Monday to Friday. Let them have the weekend to, work on things and wrap things up. And that kind of applies a little bit more to flex assignments, because courseware, it's open until you say it's over. But it's been a really unique experience in seeing how so many different teachers and classes have used this and the success that they're having. It makes me really proud to see the people who have really jumped on board and realized that this is a great feature for our students. And I'm really looking forward to working with our teachers to show them how they can use this going into next school year too.
And I think this would be a great program to incorporate into any sort of blended learning classroom or instruction.
Absolutely. One of our PDs, actually probably several of our PDs, will focus just on that piece, the blended learning piece. And it's been so awesome to watch teachers who were fearful of even, using any type of virtual learning, or even using Google Classroom. They just had that fear, or maybe it wasn't something they worked with before, and now that it's kind of our hands were forced to try new things and explore. So I think blended learning, it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I think that we need to be incorporating that in all of our schools. I think it's going to be an easier task now that we've had this experience and have seen so much. And I mean, the digital learning channel has been amazing. I've learned so much through watching the other videos and different things like that. And it's so great that they're keeping these up and putting them out there for everybody to keep going back and forth to. I have like a list of what I want to review over the summer.
That's great.
Just for myself. So I think it's going to be a really exciting school year next year, moving into, just the different type of teachers that we're going to be when we get to see our students face to face again.
Oh, I agree. I'm optimistic. This has been a crash course for a lot of teachers, and as always, they rose to the occasion. So I think there's going to be a lot of positive to come out of this.
I do too. I'm always a glasses half full, silver lining kind of girl. Yes, I wish this wouldn't have happened, but looking at the way our teachers and our students and our parents rose to the occasion has been very humbling and very exciting to watch from the sidelines, and just enjoy seeing all of the improvement that everybody made. My own children included, just watching them try new things and their different activities that they had to do at home, and they were building things and taking pictures and working together. It's really created a different sense of learning and communication and teamwork that, I never would have thought before. I didn't even really ever do Zoom meetings until this, or a Google Meet. So it's been really exciting.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me just run in here so I don't go over my time. I want to jump over to the menu button. This you can get from pretty much anywhere up here. So again, let's look here. We have this help center. Like I said, those would change. You can see there's a lot of more what's new in here. So that you can, if you have any questions or you're confused about something, the courseware instructor user guide is phenomenal. It's a great resource, and they update this often. So it's always good to check that out and see what updates were made. But this other button over here, we have our top left is our menu button. From here, you could go directly to your course sections, classrooms, students. But this is where you can also look at the course catalog. So maybe you are looking into what you're teaching next year. Your principal's giving you your assignment, and you're thinking, well, I really enjoyed using this for NTI, so I want to see how I can use it for next school year. You can come here to the course catalog and search all of the courses that are offered through Edmentum, and they are adding more. So let's say you just want to open up here with this business English. When you come to the course catalog, you now have all of the access that you would have if you created a course. You can look at the orientation. I love looking at the syllabus because I think it's a great guide for planning. I'm a big planner. I like to write things down. I'm definitely a pencil paper type person. This has definitely taught me to not do that because I don't want to use up all my drink at home. So the syllabus is a great option to just download and use as a guide. I do get a question a lot the day here. People want to know, how quickly can students get through it? It's not necessarily about how quickly a student could get through it. This here is just a guide if a teacher was using this every day throughout their lessons. But if your student's using this for, let's say, credit recovery or to recoup a couple of standards, that's really student motivation. You can't put a time frame on it, because if that student is really motivated, they will get through the course that you assign or the sections of that course a lot quicker than a student who may need a little bit more push to get going. So anytime you look at a syllabus, kind of just look at this and realize it's really just a guide and not something that would apply maybe to the way you're using it in your classroom. The other great feature is you can come in here and see everything that's offered in Business English A. You can open up the pretest and go through it. You can look at the discussions. This is a great way for teachers to decide if it's something they want to omit or lock. So always keep in mind to jump into the syllabus when you are looking for what type of course you want to use in your classroom. Let's see here. So if we go back to the menu button, my other favorite feature is I have two, the reports feature. So here you can create these reports to recur each time. So recurring reports. So I have these set to come on Fridays at 3:00. This is a great feature. It was awesome. Teachers loved it for NTI because they didn't have to remember to create that report. They set it up and it did it for them all the way through NTI. So you have a couple of options here. You can do the course progress report. So that's a great summary for all of your active courses, including the last access date. So if a student, when a student accessed it last. There's your gradebook report card. This is a great one to run weekly. It'll be your course activities and a summary of your grades. And then obviously a weekly progress report is the record of attempted and completed course activities and a graph for the progress. I think that's great for ECE. I know I always when I was a special ed teacher, I really liked graphing the progress. It was just a great visual for me and parents and students. So that's a great report. And then the course audit report is a comprehensive review of everything with the completion, and it's pretty much all of your data that you need. So you can run these at any time, but you can also set them up to run at a certain date and time. The other feature that I love, you can also see your upcoming. So what's coming up here. So you can see on May 21st and May 22nd, I have those reports coming. When you go to the menu button, the other feature that I love is the classic reports. This is something that we're really going to dive into and get some videos created for everyone, because these reports are phenomenal and they will really help you when you're working with this program in your classrooms. My favorite report, again, because I was a special ed teacher for many, many years, is the strengths and needs by class report. This report will identify the specific areas of strengths and weaknesses for your class as a whole, including individual students based on a single test. So if you had all of your students take a certain pre-test or after a post-test or mastery test, you want to see where are they? Where are they following? I know a lot of teachers struggle with grouping their students if they're doing the workshop model and in blended learning. This strengths and needs class report is awesome because it will break your students down into 4 categories, and then the guesswork is out of your grouping. We often, I think sometimes, myself included, I would fall into a rut when I was grouping students and I wouldn't change those groups. A lot of times I would just keep the groups going for several weeks, and that's not always the best practice. Sometimes a student may struggle in one area, but they have a lot of strengths in other areas. So that's a really good class report to run. Anytime you're working on a new standard or you end a specific unit, it's just a really good, quick visual look at where your students fall in your class. And I like that you can do that by each section. So I often tell teachers if they're using this to make sure they do their sections by, period 1, period 2. And then that way you can do these types of reports that'll show your class report. Same with the class usage summary. You can do a test progress report. Again, this really is one of my favorite features because I love documentation. I love reviewing data and looking at the progress. So we will work on getting you all some visuals and videos on how to use these. And I really hope that will be something that you look forward to using next school year. So that's about it for today. I appreciate everybody coming on. This has been such a great learning experience for me, and I love our digital learning channel. I've never seen anything like this in any other district. So we're super lucky to have all of you and everything that you've done to help us get through this.
Well, thank you very much, Summer. That was some great information. We appreciate it. And we will get this video as soon as we can. We will get it posted on demand on the JCPS Digital Learning channel so people can come back and watch it and use the power of pause if they need to. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. I also linked our video resources on the schedule too.
Great. So if people go to the virtual learning schedule, just hover over your name and then they can get to those resources. Thank you very much.
Yes,
we appreciate it.
All right. Thank
Have
you.
a good day. Thank you.
You too. Hey, Ashley.
Yes, we have Ashley on deck. And Ashley is here to talk to us about JCPS assessment, correct?
Yes, the assessment landscape, definitely. So am I good to go?
You're good to go. I'm Stephen Durham. I'm with the JCPS Digital Innovation Team, and I'm here with Ashley. She's going to talk to us about the assessment landscape. Take it away, Ashley.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. We are down to 6 days think, counting today, if I've calculated correctly.
Wow.
So we are on the home stretch, and I know everybody's ready. So I'm going to go on and share my screen with you so you can see everything that I'm doing. And I'm going to put this in present mode.
Yep, you're doing good. And
we're going to turn on our closed captioning.
And then hide that one. You got it.
All right.
And if you don't mind, click the drop down next to closed captioning and select text size and make it large.
Perfect. All right. So I think that should be able, I think this closed captioning is working, at least on my screen currently. I am Ashley Byerly. I am an acceleration coach with MTSS Academic under teaching and learning. And we were a new department this year and tasked with a big job that we want to close achievement gaps for all struggling learners so we can see more acceleration and not just small progressional steps as we go. So we created or revised the JCPS assessment.
I'm sorry, Ashley, can I interrupt you?
It really focuses on, yes?
Do you mind clicking the hide button right there next to stop sharing? If you click hide, and that way it won't cover up some of the subtitles.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Is that better?
Yes, and if you have the digital learning channel open on another device, make sure to mute it, please, so we don't get any echo of my voice. Thank you.
Right, it is muted, so
all right,
we should be good to go.
Sounds good.
And I'm having to kind of move around the house. For some reason, the internet is not quite working the way that it should, so hopefully this is a little bit better.
Yes, it's going good right now.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the JCPS assessment landscape incorporates multiple forms of data in the classroom. So we're going to spend some time today reviewing the assessment landscape and honestly breaking that down as, okay, so what now? How does that look in a classroom? Because we always know as teachers that we have these big utopia pictures, but until someone breaks it down for us of what does that actually look like, it seems like an idea so far away that we're not able to implement it. So hopefully by the end of this session, you are able to take these ideas and run with it, whether it's for the rest of the school year or if you are watching, thinking about next school year, I'm going to be giving you some very easy to implement strategies that some you might already know and some you might not. So hopefully you get as much out of this as we hope today. So this is a screenshot of our assessment landscape. And when you hover over my name on the virtual learning schedule, this presentation is available. Well, this is actually a link here. So I'm going to click on that in just a second, but I think the number one thing that I took from the assessment landscape, I put up there in italics. It's an intentional process of gathering information. Now, I know educators have buzzwords that come in and come out. Intentional is one of those buzzwords right now. And sometimes I think some of us think we overuse it, but let's think about what intentional actually means. It has a purpose. We're not just gathering data from here and from there. The data that we gather is the data we actually need. So instead of going into the dark and just saying, I need another grade, I'm going to have students do this, we come from a different view in our glasses, a different perspective, and think, okay, instead of just gathering anything, what kind of data do I need? Do I need to know about this standard? And developing a purpose behind the data we're gathering in order to make it more intentional. So it is a buzzword, but it also is a word that is so descriptive of how data should actually be used. It's formal and it's informal. It's not just a bunch of summative grades. We're going to be talking about how can it be both. And the purpose of this data is to figure out where are students currently, where have they been, and where are they going? So we can take those levels, communicate it to the students, and develop a plan of action to go further. So this is a view of our assessment landscape. I'm going to click on it here. So it takes us, and you can see exactly what it looks like when you go into the screen. It's on the CDLI page, but if you scroll down, each one of these blocks is a link to a different document. So if we're saying that the ideal state of assessment in our district would include 4 components: formative assessment, universal screeners, demonstrations of learning, and district common assessments. However, since we don't provide those, you can see in parentheses, it says school-based benchmark assessments. So that might be maybe you have a learning check, an interim check every now and then, kind of a cumulative, just to kind of see where are students based upon the standards we've already taught. So I'm going to click on formative assessment for just a second so you know what appears. Each one of these has a descriptor. So all of these components include the exact same format as what you see currently. It has a purpose. We explain what that type of assessment, why do we use it, how should we use it, and then examples. And the number one thing that sticks out to me on formative assessment is right here, where it says formative assessment has the largest impact on student achievement. Let's take a step back for a second. We are so busy looking at MAP screeners. We look at benchmark assessments or DRAs. Maybe we have a math diagnostic. We constantly are taking grades in our classroom to determine if students meet or do not meet expectations. But none of those really equate to formative assessment. And formative assessment, which we talk about more in just a minute, is the number one indicator for student achievement. The more formative assessment we have, the better students perform. So you can kind of peruse this on your own. There are some definite references at the bottom that you could research more if you want to hear more. If I go back to the JCPS assessment landscape, you can see that there's a section for universal screeners, demonstrations of learning, and then that common assessment. I'm going to click on this demonstration of learning. I get a lot of questions about what this means. It's basically an authentic way to share what students have learned. So it could be formative. It could be a common formative. It could be a benchmark. And you might see this in student defenses and some kind of performance-based task. So when we think of demonstration of learning, it's just an opportunity for the student to share what they know. So you can peruse this on your own time, but this is the view of the assessment landscape, and we want each classroom in JCPS to include all 4 components. So be thinking as you kind of wrap up this year in the next 6 days, as well as move into next year, how can I ensure that my classroom has all 4 of these components? Now, in the classroom, we take that JCPS assessment landscape, and where the assessment landscape looks like all assessments are created equal, I'm here to tell you that not all assessments are created equal, right? This comes from Susan Burkhart's How to Make Decisions with Different Kinds of Student Assessment Data. And you can see that she might have different language on the screen, but the message is technically the same. There are 4 types of data we can use. But what I love about this visual is how large and how small some areas are. So we can truly compare how often data should be in our classroom. So you have the interim benchmarks here. Think of this as the universal screener. You might use some backpack defenses in this way, which goes along with our demonstrations of learning. You might have some kind of cumulative assessment. You know, in fact, if you remember a couple of 3 weeks ago when we were doing a study island session, I mentioned that there were school-based benchmark assessments available. If that's something that you all need some kind of computer program to assess it all, because maybe that's just something you want to explore next year, we can set that up for you. So it's not the only way of providing interim and benchmark assessments, it's just one way. So using that data is so important. But the thing about the map screener is it's awesome, but once I start teaching to some of those standards that we look at on the map data, that data is now old. So we have to transition. We can't rely on the same data point all semester, all term, because at that point we're working with old data and it's not current. So therefore we're really not giving students what they need. They have the accountability quadrant, which consists of K-Prep. For us, it might also be ACT if you think secondary. We have the summative assessments or performance-based with the demonstrations of learning. And then we also have the formative assessment. And I've made sure to include that these are ungraded assessments. And it's just for the purpose to check understanding. I'm not taking a grade on them. I am just maybe I'm observing. Maybe the students do an exit slip. Maybe there's a bell ringer to see what they remember from yesterday. It could be so many different types of formats, but look at the size of each quadrant. That's how much it should be represented in your classroom. So the accountability assessment is the smallest. That's because it happens one time a year at the end of the year. So we should not see people teaching to the K-Prep in essence, because that is one small data point. We have map screeners and we have those benchmark assessments. But as we already said, that data is old after you start working with it. So you can see it takes up more space than the K-Prep, but it's still not the largest. Grading is the next biggest quadrant. It's summative. We are looking for the end results, maybe at the end of a unit. The number one thing that I want people to remember, though, about grading and summative assessments is it should be no surprise. By the time we get to a summative assessment, I should be able to predict exactly how my students should score because I have provided so many formative assessments along the way. I already know how my students are going to perform because I have provided multiple checks for understanding along the way. And let me tell you, it is no coincidence that formative assessment has the word form inside of it because formative assessment is used to form instruction based on data. So think about your whole assessment landscape in your classroom this year. Where did you spend the majority of your time? Which data point? Was it grading and the map screeners? Okay, if so, then your goal this next year is to incorporate some more formative assessment. If you spend so much time working towards that end result of the K-Prep, think about what are some easy ways to start incorporating other types of student assessment data. We want all 4 quadrants in your classroom. We want all 4 from this as well as the other JCPS assessment landscape to be inside of your PLC, that when we come into your PLC, we hear all this data being talked about in order to accelerate student learning.
I love that graphic, and I think it's great. I think the map scores are a great tool, but it is heartbreaking sometimes watching students do their backpack defense, and they talk about how they're a map score number, and their academic performance is so much more than just that map score, and this graphic shows it. So I really do appreciate it.
Yes, the graphic, that's why I love it so much, because I feel like we treat assessments created equally, but not all assessments should be equal. So this kind of visualizes that. And I'm a visual learner, so this really struck home for me when I first saw it. So when we think about grades in that summative quadrant, and we think about 2 types of student, we have the high achieving students who are always at grade level or above, as well as the struggling learners. What perceptions do they have? Because the number one thing I can tell you is grades are personal. Grades can be a positive thing or they can be a negative blip for that student's day. So when we think about the struggling learner and the high achieving learner, there are extreme differences. Struggling learners have a really rocky relationship with grades because it already confirms what they already believe. Those students already know that they might struggle in the classroom, or that math is really hard for them. So when they get that D or F or C, we are just bringing home what they already think, which then leads to a decline in motivation and engagement. And it shows what they view as their value. And it constantly is evidence of their failure. So thinking about grades from the struggling learner, now change that to the high achieving learner. Those students, they think all grades are fair. That's what they deserve. They enjoy those moments where the papers get passed out. They show that they can make it through those long assessments like map screeners and summative assessments. And it builds their confidence. It doesn't take it down. So our goal today is to bring in more of that formative assessment and take up the majority of your classroom, because we recognize grades aren't disappearing, but we can improve it. We can strengthen what's already going on in our classroom, not wipe it clean, but using what you already do and making it better. So we want to build that academic capacity in students while also increasing the rigor with our instruction. So when you think about the formative assessment that you've given in your classroom, we already know it's one of the best ways to improve academic performance. We know that they're ungraded and that it's checks for understanding. We know that they are used for formative purposes, so we can form instruction. And we know that the more formative assessment and feedback that we provide, that success the students demonstrate is easily sustained for a longer period of time. And in fact, research shows that stronger formative assessment and feedback increases those accountability test scores at that point. So we've all given feedback, but are we truly doing effective feedback? So before we get into what's ineffective, I loved this quote because it just kind of reinforced what we already know, that if we provide rich formative assessment in the majority of our day in our classrooms, one student can learn in 6 or 7 months what the other students can learn in an entire year. Now think about what I just said. I can accelerate a student's performance. And if I have student A and student B, and student A learns from point A to point B the entire year, student B can get to point B in 6 or 7 months. Wow. Like when we talk about the acceleration of students, that is what sticks out. So when we think about acceleration plans and next year and bridging some of those gaps that we know students are going to come in with due to the COVID situation, remember this, because it is possible if we provide the rich formative assessment we're talking about. So thinking about feedback, though, there are types of feedback we want to avoid. We want to avoid artificial or undeserved praise in order to make students feel better. I think we've all done this at some point. I mean, thinking back in my classroom, that student that's just having a hard day and can't seem to remember everything, I go over there and I say, but you're working really hard. I know that you want to do well on this, so just keep going. And that has its place in the classroom, obviously. But if they're not really working hard, and I'm just saying that in order to get them back on track, that's artificial, and it's actually counterproductive. Some of us might use rewards, stickers, candies, or maybe they provide punishments for students. Maybe you're someone that takes away the recess time because the student isn't working the way that you need to. Is it truly, we've been doing that for years, and for some students, for most students, it doesn't work at all. So how can we change the process if we know it's not working anymore? Let's use this opportunity to change it. We know that rewards and punishments are very counterproductive to the type of feedback that we need. Feedback without description. Oh my goodness, we have all been guilty of this, especially in busy days. But when we go to a student, we're like, yep, that's correct, or nope, that's wrong. And that's where we leave it. The student has no idea why it's wrong. The student that even got it right, what made that stick out to you? Maybe they showed their work and you could really see their thinking through the work that they showed. We have to provide description. And the description needs to relate to the standard. So if I go and I'm assessing on main idea and the student wrote maybe a short answer response to it, but then I spend the time with my feedback talking about how they didn't capitalize, that's not connected to the standard. It has its place. We don't want to ignore some of those grammatical and punctuation errors, but it's not the time for it. Make sure that the feedback that you provide actually connects to the standard or the purpose of the assessment. And lastly, feedback that focuses more on the student than the task can be very ineffective. Think about factual evidence in a crime case. We have to take our feelings out of it. We have to take what we know about the person out of the situation. All we have is what's in front of us. So keep it factual. Keep it factual and keep the main thing the main thing. So when we think about formative assessment, there are 6 principles we really want to focus on. Number 1, we know that the goals need to be clear, specific, and at the beginning. And in fact, we really want to repeat our goals throughout the lesson. It needs to be in student-friendly terms. And many times it actually helps support if we provide a visual for students. Think about a concept map that you could display, or there are standards walls out there where the student sees the end goal in the middle, and then all of those prongs sticking out of the standard are all of the different tasks and targets and standards that they're going to be learning, because that student then knows, so this prong leads to this prong, and they're seeing a visual of the big picture. So those clear goals can have a variety of formats, but regardless, they need to be student-friendly, clear, and they need to be at the beginning for sure. 2, they need to provide feedback that demonstrates explicitly how students can achieve the goal. So think about the digestive system. Maybe I want to see what students can remember or recall about it. But like I said earlier, maybe you provide feedback on the grammar that they use in their response. That doesn't connect to the learning goal. So always make sure your feedback connects to the learning goal. 3, think about how you can involve all learners in the feedback process. That includes teacher, student, and peer. So maybe a student can self-assess with rubrics, work samples. Maybe they can assess using the answer keys for them to solve where they went wrong along the way. Peer feedback, maybe they can compare whiteboards. Maybe they have sticky note summaries and they write it together. Maybe they can look at their work, find similarities and differences. Peer feedback can be equally valuable. And obviously, teacher feedback, we are doing that constantly. You are the facilitator. Let the students do the work. So teacher feedback is so important, but the interactions among students is even more important. 4, deliver feedback as immediately and frequently as possible. I remember one time I was teaching 5th grade on demand, and I needed to see, the progress of something. So I gave them an on-demand prompt, students wrote it, and then I was not in the mood to grade it, obviously. So it went into my bag, and it sat there for a week. Now, I know more people than just me have done this. At the week, I pull it out and I grade it, and already I was like, this data is old. Like, I can't even use this anymore. If we're not ready to grade things immediately, do we really even need that data to begin with? So when you provide an assessment opportunity for students, be ready to deliver. Provide that feedback, because after a week of those papers sitting in your bag, and we're all guilty of it, right, it's lost its point, and you've lost your opportunity to deliver that immediate and frequent descriptive feedback. You can link academic progress to controllable factors. Hard work, tenacity. That's where we were talking earlier about feeling good. I could look at one of my students and say, you are working so hard. Let's use that hard work that you're using and make sure that we're focused on finding the main idea in the passage, because I see that we're off topic over here. Providing that controllable factor for them that the students can understand, but linking it to the standard I want to assess. And lastly, be genuine, be encouraging, because those struggling learners and even some of our high achieving learners, they can read through us if we're not genuine and we're being fake. So think about your feedback and really be intentional. There's that word again. Not only intentional in what assessment I'm going to provide, but intentional in what am I going to say about it. So I'm going to show you just some quick examples of formative assessment that maybe you can apply tomorrow in your classroom, as well as including some different virtual ways of doing some of these things, because I recognize that we are an NTI. So thinking about the end of the school year and how we're going to wrap things up, hopefully you can incorporate some of these tomorrow. One is the stick it, post-it responses, basically, that demonstrate understanding. You can ask a question and provide a prompt. The students can either respond individually or in pairs, and they write their response on their sticky note. So when they're ready to provide that movement in the classroom, and after they respond, they can walk up and put it on a wall or an anchor chart of some type. And while the students are doing that, I remember I used this all the time in my classroom. I would start taking the answers and sorting them and classifying them either by misconception or celebrations, lows and grows. Maybe I noticed that 5 or 6 students had the exact same misconception, and I would put those together. Then I noticed that 10 students, man, they hit it on target and they provided the evidence that I wanted. They were together. So I start looking for some of those indicators for student performance. After I do that and we share successes and we share some of those opportunities that we need to address misconceptions, it provides me more opportunity to pull small groups if I need to. The tip I'll give you though, and I put it in there in that box, have them write their names on the back. It takes away all of the pressure, peer pressure of students knowing who wrote what. So those students that are really self-conscious don't have to worry about other students seeing what they did. And so I would never look at their responses until class was over. And then I would start forming small groups from it. Now, if this is something that you want to do, Google Jamboard is awesome. I've used it. It's very easy. Think about Padlet as well. Padlet's just as effective. And students can quickly put up their response virtually for all to see, and students could respond to it as well. Cubes, you can see in the picture, the visual of an example of what this is like. I remember I had large cubes as well. They are like dice, but each side has its own topic or questions or tasks to complete. Whether they do these individually or in pairs is totally up to you. But they take turns, they roll, they respond, and you can either create your own virtual dice. If you were like me, I remember I lost my dice one time. I went and borrowed a basic die, and then I had a slip of paper that said, if you roll a 1, you answer this question. If you roll a 2, you answer this question. So it's very versatile for all types of classes and subjects. Vocabulary sorts are awesome, whether you use it as a pre-assessment, formative to see how they're doing, or summative. It provides just a quick visual, and that's easily used for any subject, and it can be differentiated. So you assign the purpose. Maybe they're doing true and false. Maybe they're sorting vocabulary words by topics. Maybe you give them statements and they have to decide whether they agree or disagree. There are so many opportunities to use sorts in your classroom. Carousels, you might have heard this as gallery walks. I know that's how I always refer to it. Round the room thinking, basically. Any subject, teachers can go around and provide feedback. I remember I walked around, I had my own set of Post-its. I was writing descriptive feedback and I would put it up there as well. Students rotate through every poster. They can provide their own response or respond to others as well. And then at the end, when you wrap it up, I'm able to pull off some that stick out to me, as well as address those misconceptions and celebrations. So let's review for a second. We have to stop thinking of assessment as accountability and start thinking of it as a teaching tool. So when you assign your assessment, if there is no purpose, or if you are not going to be able to provide the feedback in a timely way, there's no point in that assessment. So just remember to be intentional. What do you want out of the data you're about to get? So I've linked here, you have the JCPS assessment landscape to Susan Burkhart's. Now the thing about it is I know it looks messy. And you can see Universal Screeners connects to the interim benchmark up here at the top. The demonstrations of learning could be 3 of these quadrants. It could be the benchmark, the formative, it could be part of grading. These school-based assessments, that would link up here to interim benchmark. You can see nothing links to accountability because K-Prep is in a league of its own. But the part that sticks out to me is look at formative assessment. Over here, it connects to this, and it only connects to the formative assessment box. That shows how important formative assessment is, that it gets its own quadrant. It's not shared, and it's large. It's the biggest. So thinking about, as you wrap up your year and going forth, what does your classroom look like? Is it a messy assessment landscape like this? If so, that's okay. But think about the amount of time you've spent with each of these quadrants. The importance of formative assessment here and how large it is signifies its importance in acceleration. It has to take up the majority of your day. So I encourage you, as we kind of wrap up here and in this session, to think of some easy ways that I can provide formative assessment daily, multiple times a day. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy. You saw some of the examples that I gave you. Some of those I used, those were my most popular, but I'm not limited to just that. So I encourage you, as you wrap up and think about your day tomorrow, or maybe you think about next year, that you start incorporating some of these different assessment types and really think about the time you spend on each one. Because the assessment landscape, that is the ideal situation. So we need to take steps in order to reach that ideal situation next year.
Thank you very much, Ashley. I think this is going to be a reset for many teachers. And just like I think they're going to go back and use technology differently, I hope through this reset, they'll also think about how they're using assessment.
Yes, and that's the goal here. I realize that there's only 6 days left, and some things you can definitely implement tomorrow, even though this year's not over. But we're also not going to ignore the elephant in the room that the year is almost over. So let's use this opportunity. We've learned from COVID that nothing's going to be the same anymore. So we know that everything we've done in the past isn't working. So why not use this opportunity to change it up and start fresh?
I like that. Come out with the positive. Yes. Well, thank you very much, Ashley. Appreciate it. And we'll get that up on demand on the Digital Learning Channel.
All right. Thank you, guys, and have a great week. And I will see you Wednesday at 10.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Durham with the JCPS Digital Innovation Team, and I'm sure we have a lot of people tuning in right now. If you are on Twitter, you have probably seen Bitmoji Classrooms. So here we have Rachel is going to teach us more about that. Welcome, Rachel. Just hit your unmute, please.
All right.
There you go. Yes, ready to screen share. Great. Yeah, Bitmoji Classroom is blowing up. Lots of people really interested in it. Yes.
Okay, let's get started. So my name is Rachel Johnson, and I am at Gudermuth Elementary. And today we're going to just talk about not only how to make a Bitmoji classroom, but some resources and ideas you can use as we continue on with NTI these next couple of days, but then also thinking about what this could look like once we go back to school, or if the possibility of NTI approaches again, how could we utilize this in the best way possible? And like you said, if you get on Twitter, you will see so many of these on there. And I can't take credit for coming up with the idea, but what has been really great about this whole thing is seeing other people post their classrooms and what they're utilizing in there, what resources they're using, how they're making it look, and how you can tweak it to make it work with your students. So when I first saw one, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Being an ESL teacher, I wanted to think about how I could make this work for my English language learners, and then just started diving into all the different resources that you could put into it. And what makes this so great as well is you don't need a special app to make a Bitmoji classroom. All you need is Google Slides and Google Images and a Bitmoji extension, which I'll show you all how to get to later, but that's it. So it's really just a lot of tedious work of copying and pasting and putting images into the classroom. But once it's finished, it's such an engaging thing for students. And they'll keep coming back each week to see what you're putting in there. So like I said, I'm not only going to tell you how to make it, but I am going to share some resources with you as well at the end. But besides these being just a fun and cute thing to make, they really do have a lot of benefits to them. So the main one being that they are engaging for our students. And they're engaging because they provide interaction opportunities. You're letting them click through the classroom, search through resources. Maybe you're incorporating manipulatives in your classroom, so students are still getting that play. You're also providing them choice in the activities and books that you're placing in the room. A big one for me is differentiation. This is such a great tool for that because it can provide so many scaffolds for students. I think about my English language learners again, and how they're getting the visuals that they need from the slide, plus all of the links and materials you're posting. You can provide books that give them the listening option if they're not on grade level. And then also it's providing them with visuals, like I said, but then thinking about how you could make different classrooms based on the levels of your students. And then also the last thing is that these can be used across multiple content areas. And if you get on Twitter, you can see all of these come to life. There's music, there's PE, there's readers theater, there's even behavior coaches and reading specialists. They're all making these bitmoji classrooms. So if you're not a classroom teacher, don't think that you cannot make one of these, because that is not true. They are for everyone, and they provide a lot of great supports for our students. So we're going to get into how to make it. So I'm just going to show a blank slide. And you always want to start with a blank slide. You don't want any text on here, just nice and clean. And the first thing you want to do is you want to add a background. So what you want to do is you'll just go to Google, and you can type in two things. You can type in empty room wallpaper. And you always want to type in wallpaper because you'll get a larger image in it. And when it's a larger image, it won't be pixelated when you insert it into your slide. So if you see, there are tons of options here. There's some that already have furniture. So if you wanted one like this, you could just right click and save to your device. There's also some that are just the floor and the wall, but you have to be careful because as you're searching, you may find some that have markings on them, and that is because they cost money. So there are tons of free choices on here, so always search around. Personally, for me, I like to just make my own floor and my own wallpaper. So to do that, all I simply have to do is type in floor. And you want to find an option where it has the floor and the wallpaper together, and that is a high resolution. So I'm going to right click. Well, I'm going to try to right click and save this image to my computer. And then I'm going to go back to my Google slide and insert this as my background. And you want to set it as your background because as you start adding furniture and resources, you don't want your background to shift around. You want it to be stationary and set in place. So setting it as the background, you won't have to worry about it moving. So I'm going to choose my image. And I'm going to select the floor. And then now I'm ready to start adding things. Now for me, I like to make a wallpaper. You can leave it white if you want, but a simple way just to add a wallpaper to your room is just adding a shape. So if I were to click the shapes button and insert a rectangle, I could just outline this white space here. And then I could click the paint can to fill the color with a solid option or a gradient option here. I'm going to choose this orange one, and then I'm going to remove my border. So then I just have a fun background. All right, so now we're ready to start adding our furniture. And the first piece of furniture that I always put in my Bitmoji classroom is my bookshelf, since that's where I'm going to post most of my resources. So to do that, all you have to do again is go back to Google Images and search empty bookshelf. And once again, you'll see tons of options here. And you can pick whatever style that you like. You want one though that is clean and crisp. It doesn't have markings on it. Personally, I like this one because it has more shelving. So all I'm going to do when I want to insert it into my classroom is I just have to right click and copy the image. And I'll go back to my classroom and hit Control V to insert it in there and then adjust the size.
Rachel, I was just wondering if you've had any success just using the insert and then searching the Google images. Do you find you do, but does it do better to do the just Google for the whole thing?
Yeah, you can do either one, whatever one you're comfortable with. I always feel like I can see the image better when I go to Google instead of just going through the Google slides.
Inserting the image, yeah.
Yeah, because you can see once you start clicking through some of those, a lot of them have markings on them because they're paid images. So it's whatever you prefer. And what he's talking about is if you go to insert an image, you can do search the web. And you can actually type in your images here if you want. So yeah, that's a great option. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So moving on to the next piece of furniture that I'm going to show you, and this can go for anything that you're going to put in here. Sometimes when you find an image on Google, you may see that it has a background to it. And if you were to copy and paste that into your classroom, it wouldn't look right because it would have a white background. So what you want to do is you'll want to remove that. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add a kidney table to my classroom. I love to incorporate things that I actually have in my room so the kids, when they see it, it's a familiar thing for them and they can get excited about that. So I'm going to go back to Google and I'm going to type in kidney table. And I'm going to just choose one that looks similar to mine. And you can see here, it has the white background around it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website called remove.bg. This website is so awesome because you can drop any image in here and it'll take the background off of it for you. So I'm going to click my image and drag it to the tab and then just drop it. And then all I have to do from here is just right click on this image. Oops. Or you can save it to your computer, either one. You can copy or download. If you don't want a ton of pictures saved to your computer, copy is always a good option. And then I'm just gonna go back, Control V, and paste into the room. Now, if I wanted to flip this so it's facing the other direction, what I could do is I could click something called Format Options. And then I can click Size and Rotation. And there's a button here that says Flip. And I would just simply hit that and it changes the direction of the kidney table. I want to show one more example too of how to move furniture around. If you say you wanted your kidney table behind your bookshelf, I know you don't want that, but just for an example here, you can move objects forward and behind by doing two things. You can either right click on the object, find the word order, and then you have options here of send backwards or send to the back. So if I wanted to send this behind the bookshelf, I could just click send backwards and it's going to send whatever I want behind the bookshelf. Also, if I wanted to bring it forward, I could just right click again and click bring to front. And that's how you'll notice as you start adding a lot more furniture, you'll want things to be in front and behind. So that's always a good option for that. Now, the next thing is the bitmoji extension. And if you're working from Chrome, I've also heard that Windows computers have this capability as well. But you want to download the bitmoji extension to your computer. And why you need to do that is because it makes inserting a bitmoji a lot easier rather than having to save it from your phone to your computer and then uploading it.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is go to the web store. And then in the web store, you just have to type in bitmoji. And see, I already have it downloaded here, but you'll just download the bitmoji extension and it will save to the top part of your browser. So then when I want to insert my bitmoji, all I'm going to have to do is click the bitmoji extension and they all pop up right here. Now, some people are having a hard time finding bitmojis without words. So a suggestion I have for you is to type in the word pose. And you'll see all of these different choices here without any words. So say I wanted just this one. All I have to do is right click, copy image, and then paste into the classroom. And that's how you put in your furniture and your bitmoji. The next thing I'm going to show you really quick is how to insert a book and link it. So as we add resources, you'll want to add a picture of something, maybe the book cover or an object, and then you'll want to link that object. So I'm going to insert a book that I already pre-recorded onto my bookshelf. So to do that, I'm going to go back to Google again and search for the book's cover. So I'm going to go to Google. And the book that I read was The Bear Went Over the Mountain by Issa Tropani. So I'm going to write that in the search. I'm going to go to images. And you want to find the book cover. And then just copy and paste that into your room. Once you paste it, you'll want to adjust the size so that it fits on the shelf. I'm going to put it right here on the top shelf. Okay, so now that you have your book, you want to link it. So what I've been doing is I've actually screen recorded all of my own books because I know a lot of students right now are having a hard time accessing YouTube. And that's just because of different privacy settings on all the Chromebooks. So the best thing to do is to avoid YouTube if you can. Plus, kids really want to see you. So if you're recording yourself reading, they will really love that. So the best thing to do is to screencastify yourself, and then that video automatically saves to your drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my drive. And I'm going to go to my Screencastify folder. And then here are all the videos. And all I want to do is I want to find the video of me reading The Bear Went Over the Mountain. So here it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on the video and I'm going to get shareable link. So the link automatically copies to my clipboard. So when I go back to my classroom, I want to highlight the book that I want to link, and I'm going to hit Control and K at the same time. When I do that, a little box is going to pop up and ask you to paste the link inside. And you also have the option to search for links in there as well. So I'm going to paste my link in here. And I'm going to press apply. And now that book is linked to my video. So when students want to read this or listen to it, they'll just click it and it's going to take them right to the video in my drive. They don't have access to anything else, just the video. But then again, you don't have to worry about, are they able to watch it? Are they not? You know that they will because you are the one that had the link in your drive. So I highly suggest that when linking resources. So that's how you make a Bitmoji classroom. Obviously, this is very simple, but you follow the same steps when you're adding any piece of furniture. When you're adding a rug or you're adding a dry erase board, you follow those same steps of finding the image on Google and then possibly removing the background and pasting into your classroom. Now, if you're just tuning in, you're a little late. And if you do go to the JCPS Digital Learning Channel schedule, you can get a copy of this presentation. And I've included in here the steps to where you can watch a short how-to video, but also the steps here if you want to read it. And I also included the steps of linking objects. So that's just there for you all if you need to refer back to something. So the next thing I want to talk about really quick is some common resources that you can use in your Bitmoji classroom. Turn my captions back on here. Okay.
Thank you.
So there are so many resources out there, and I can't go through all of these. I wish I could because all of these are so great. Like I said, if you can get a copy of this presentation, definitely check out all of these websites. All you'll have to do is I linked all of their logos to the website, so you can just click on a logo and it'll take you right there. You can see I broke these resources down into categories for you. So there's read alouds, leveled readers, articles, multiple language books, and manipulatives. So you can see some of them have an asterisk next to them. That means that you're going to need an account to access their materials. The Epic books and books are ones that, we all know Epic, and books is very similar to Epic. You need a teacher account, and they're free once you make a teacher account. But the other ones, you're going to have to ask your librarian for username and passwords to get into those. I'm sure they'll be glad to help you with that. But I just want to go through two of them today that are free and you don't need an account to share with your students. So the first one I'm going to go through is Unite for Literacy. And if you haven't heard of Unite for Literacy, it is there's just a lot of books from different categories, but all of their books are narrated in English and then other languages. So if your school has a high population of English language learners, this website is going to be really cool for you to use. So you can see they have Earth and Sky, animals, just tons of different options here. But you can search for a particular language. So for example, our school has a high population of Swahili speakers, Somali speakers. So if I have Swahili here, Somali, I'm going to click Somali, and then all of the books that are in Somali will pop up. And then when you want to link one of the books, you can just choose one, and you would just copy and paste this link, and then the narration will be there for them. So all you would have to do is click. They could click the English button. It will read it to them in English. You could click the Somali button. It will read it to them in Somali. And this is really great because if we think about the kids at home whose parents can't really help them because they don't speak a lot of English, this would be a great thing for them to help them with. The next resource I want to show really quickly is the Rivet website. And Rivet is a website of leveled readers. Like I said, there are no accounts required, so you can just copy the link of the book and paste it right into your Bitmoji classroom. So why I really love Rivet is because they have so many books that are engaging for the students that they would be really interested in. They have a lot of YouTube books a lot of YouTube videos they've turned into books, adventure, arts and crafts. So tons of things here that kids could read about that they were interested in. Another great feature is that they're leveled. So it goes up to level 8, but then the Fontes and Pinnell level is matched with that. So if I wanted to read a level 3, They also have these in Spanish as well. I didn't mention that. If I wanted to read a level 3 book, I could just scroll through here, see all about slime. You know, kids love slime. I could click that book. All they have to do to read it is click through the arrows and the listening option here, press in this little cat, and he will read the text. So another great resource there. But just remember that you don't have to do your classroom in a traditional classroom. If you want to do a theme or you wanted to do just a different location, you definitely can. So, oh wait, I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Hold on one second. Oh, sorry, let me back up. So here's an example of my classroom. You can see I have some books on the shelf here from different resources. I have some math manipulatives, and then I have a mini lesson on my whiteboard. You know, when I think about these Bitmoji classrooms and the use of the whiteboard, you can totally use the whiteboard as you would in your normal classroom, posting announcements, showing videos. So definitely use that space as somewhere to post things for students to see. And then, like I said, going into themes. For ESL, we have a program called On Our Way to English. And in that program, they have units that are thematic units. In a 4th grade unit, they have one called Under the Canopy. So why not take the students to the rainforest so they can start to build that background knowledge? They can see what the rainforest looks like. They can see the animals that live there, and then start exploring some books to understand more in depth about what the rainforest is. Also, here's another option. This is actually my assignment this week for my 2nd grade students, but taking them on a little field trip to an amusement park. But notice there's no bookshelf here. I've actually linked amusement park rides. So students can click on the roller coaster and it will take them to a book on Rivet to read about how roller coasters are made. Then they can go to Flipgrid to record a Flipgrid video to tell me in their own words how they're made. And then giving them the option to learn about merry-go-rounds and Ferris wheels and cotton candy, and then giving them an opportunity to build their own amusement park ride using those virtual manipulatives. The last example I have here is from a 1st grade teacher at my school at Gudermuth Elementary. This is Miss Gentry, and she, again, did not use a bookshelf. She linked animals. So her class is learning about the forest, and so students can click on a particular animal to learn more about it, and then sharing what they know on Flipgrid. So if I were to click the squirrel here, it's going to take me to a website called Pebble Go, and you'll want to get the login from your librarian. But this is such a fun website and engaging for students. You have different topics about squirrels. There's videos. They can listen to the articles, maps, activities. So a lot of fun activities here on Pebble Go. And that's all that I have to share with you all today. I know that Twitter is a great place for teachers to go. It's a great place for professional learning. I know that just these past couple of weeks preparing for this presentation, how much I've enjoyed just interacting with other teachers across the district and networking with them and seeing all of the different Bitmoji virtual classrooms. So if you are inspired after this, and you want to share your Bitmoji classroom with everyone, make sure you use the hashtag JCPS virtual room so others can see all the great things that you created and we can all just learn from each other.
That's great, Rachel. Really good information. We had a lot of people watching, a lot of people saying very positive things about you in the chat. I think it's a great skill. One of the things I've been excited about is how many people are going to come out of NTI being proficient with Google Classroom. And now I think because of Bitmoji Classroom, I think we're going to have a lot of teachers that are going to be really good at their Google slide design now. This is like a crash course in Google Slides. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think what's really great too is even thinking about next year how you could use this. And I think about a lot of our school is doing the reading workshop, so teachers are always worried about leaving students independent with their work, making sure that they're doing it. Well, why not make a Bitmoji classroom and pre-record your books and already have them on there and have your assessments and have all of your activities in a Bitmoji classroom for them to work through too. So it doesn't just have to be for NTI. Definitely think about how you could use it in the future.
I could totally see it being used in a blended learning type classroom. And that's one of the ways the students access the technology or the recorded lessons. I think that's a great idea. And I also love it's not just about making a cute classroom, it's like you're actually linking to all these great free educational resources out there, getting these kids these books that they can use, especially during this time.
Yeah, definitely the best part.
Yes, really good information. Hope to see more of those shared on Twitter. Remember, it's JCPS, hashtag JCPS virtual room. And
Yes,
we
sir.
can all see each other's. Actually, one I saw today on Twitter, a teacher had taken time and actually created a Bitmoji of her class. So she created a Bitmoji for each unique student and made like a little graduation photo of them together. So pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's so cute.
Yes, yeah. So lots of good stuff happening with that. Thank you very much, Rachel. We appreciate it. All right, well, I'm Stephen Durham. I'm with the Digital Innovation Team. And for the next half hour, the chat will be active. You can ask any question in the chat, and we will have our moderators in there, and I'll be in there as well. I'm getting ready to share a video from Joe McKim, Russell Hockenberry, and Maddie Shepard on NTI exemplars from the field. So basically what they did, they found some of the best work going on during NTI and to share those. So let me get that going now.
I teach second grade at Atkinson Elementary. This is my third year there, and also want to give a shout out to my coworkers and my team because we would not have as much success without everyone being a part of this. So, first of all, second grade, you have to think about your audience, who you're going to be working with. I work with 7 and 8-year-olds who are not as independent with technology as maybe middle schoolers and high schoolers. They had experience in Google Classroom previously in my room, but getting them independently, they're long emails, getting them typed that in, we knew that was going to kind of be a point of frustration for them. Also, who are they living with? Who's going to be helping them? They live with grandparents, they live with great-grandparents, and even family members who might not have had as much exposure to technology as well. So we streamlined our second grade work all into one place. I haven't shared this other times, but keeping everything in one place for a 7-year-old was really important too, because that if they only have to go to one place and click and it takes them directly where they're supposed to go, that's very helpful with not giving them that extra distraction of going to watch music videos on YouTube or wherever they might actually want to go rather than doing their schoolwork. So in their slide, which I'll show you in a minute, this is their first page that they get. This is something that all of our staff is using. It's similar to a choice board. So if you have a kid who loves reading, decides I want to do all my reading the first day, they have that option where they could go in a horizontal direction if they want to do all their reading or all their science. Now, in the vertical direction is set up to be structured like their school day. So we wanted to think about how we can.
You're freezing up a little bit, but that's okay. Keep going. It should be fine.
Their slides. When it's apologize. We go through their slides. You'll see all the things that say click here. We'll take them to a direct slide where they type in their answers and they do their work. So those would be set up in their normal school day setting. That structure and crave that structure as well. We've got their reminders. I keep all their passwords on here. this will also stay on the document, so you're welcome to use this as a resource. All right, going back to the original slide. Every single day in my classroom, I have a question of the day. When they come in, they hang up their backpack, they have a question on the board, and it's really just a way that I get to know my students better, or kind of find out things that might be going on at home that I wouldn't know had I just be like, okay, good morning, let's get to work. So that was important for me to make that a part of NTI. So there's little emojis on the side, and the students can drag and drop their emoji and they're 7, so they think that's cool, that they feel like they're texting, and they can type to me why they feel that way. So I've had students tell me, that they're sad, or that they don't want to do their work right now, they'd rather be outside, or they'll tell me really exciting things like, hey, like I got a new scooter today, and it's been a great way for me to connect. And those students who have experienced frustration, I can kind of type back a message like, hey, you're doing a great job. I had a student last night, and he was like, I like this page. It's the only page I know I've gotten right. And I was able to write back to him like, you've done great. Like, your math looks amazing. So hopefully it was an encouragement to him. It's just kind of one of those things where they can put out their frustration. On the next slide, I put in some images of our slides, and for their reading, we just have them answer a simple question so we know that they've read it. All of their writing, we put on their sentence stems because that might be a support that most of them have in the classroom. So I know one of our things this week was like, you need to have 3 sections in the beginning, in the middle, in the end, and we'll write on there, we need to see more than one sentence so that our expectations are clear. And with this being in Google Slides, I've been able to go in and highlight like, hey, you need to go back and fix this, or can you add punctuation? Lastly, in the corner, you'll see we've added in visual cues, just because they are young, and sometimes things might not work. This was a link I was having trouble with. It worked for some people, didn't work for others. So I went in using the snipping tool and showed them, if you can't get this to work, this is exactly what you need to do to get to this website. And my students, because they have enough visuals, it's all in one place, and they're kind of in the swing of things now, they're independently logging in and doing this on their own. Out of my 15 kids, 14 are doing this on Google Classroom, and I've had high participation rates, and they're really enjoying doing this work, and I could not be more proud of them.
That's great.
Yes, that's all I've got. Joe?
Sarah, first of all, I had a couple comments, if you don't mind. One, you have one of the best backdrops I've seen of any presenter. That's awesome. What sort of positive feedback have you gotten from your students and parents about this new way they're doing school with you?
Yeah, so a lot of my students who I was very worried about, that are a little bit more squirmy or have more behavioral episodes in the classroom, have amazed me, because they're the ones that are having the most success with this. It's totally blown my mind, and it's really changed my mindset of maybe this is something I need to implement more in the classroom when I get back. Because in my head, if I let a kid choose who maybe struggles with behavior, it's just innate, I think, in our bodies, that if you're letting them go and choose what they want to do and they're having fun or whatever, that's like a reward for that behavior. But I'm really seeing that when they get to choose, and then maybe they need to take a few minutes of a break, that's something that they actually need, and that helps them be successful more so than just rewarding, a behavioral episode. So I've been really impressed by that, and just they've become more motivated internally with being able to choose their own structure. So that choice board, I really like the idea of taking that back into the classroom, and maybe letting them choose their own science, what order they want to do their science or their writing in the week. Because at the end of the day, as long as it's getting done and they're doing their best and having fun with it, I don't care what day it gets done. I just want them, learning. So it's been really great to see that, and the parents have had positive comments on how they really appreciate that we put everything into one document, and maybe their other students from different schools or different grade levels haven't had that experience. So just everything being in one place, they've said it's been super.
I think that is great that you did that. That has been, we hear some of the concerns, and that is one, is like, there's too many different places to go. And those teachers and teams that have found ways to keep it in one place, very beneficial. So, and I agree on the choice, giving students choice. Hopefully that's a great thing that every teacher is going to take away from this. And when we return, it'll be helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Move along, because we do have 4 other people to speak for a little 30 minutes, and we are going to talk about all of components that you're talking about around student voice and choice and how they're communicating with parents. So Danielle Krogan, who is a middle school math teacher at the Marion Seymour School, has been sharing with us, but she's not able to get on today. So I believe Maddie Shepard is going to step in and talk about Danielle's work.
Yep, Danielle's had some technical difficulties today, but no worries, we will press on. So Danielle teaches middle school math, and her team has a very...
Maddie, I was able to get on.
I just got it to work from... I just got it to work from Derek's phone, so sorry for my delay.
Glad you're here.
Where's glad you're here?
Okay.
Yeah, it was technical difficulties, but I don't know where you started, but I'll just pick up with my part. So our main focus at Moore in 7th grade math and my team in general was helping teachers and students all stay organized while also keeping students engaged with voice and choice throughout our NTI time. So the first thing that we talked about was having a team set of teachers, was keeping everybody on the same page and making sure we were participating in one class. So I created this Google Sheets with check boxes that has a list of all of our student names, so that way we can check in with students that are completing work or not completing work. For example, student number 1, you can see didn't check in during week 1 or week 2 of NTI. So we reached out specifically to them over and over until they were able to at least eventually during week 3 start getting at least one assignment turned in. We also indicated on student 11, those students that were receiving paper packets, to make sure that one of us could check in with them on a regular weekly basis to see if they needed help with anything from the JCPS choice boards. And really this helped us keep up with our students to make sure they were being marked present, even if they weren't specifically completing our work, they were still at least checking in and trying to do something. And then our next part was to make sure that parents were staying on the same page. So I created this Google Slides that has all 4 of our subject and content areas on one slide that parents can see. And they're all hyperlinked, and it was really helpful for parents to see every subject in one screen, so that way they didn't have to check back and forth through our Google Classrooms to try to find individual assignments. And then if they wanted more specifics, those are all hyperlinked from each subject area too. And then finally, on organization, we posted on our Google Classroom a student checklist to keep up with all of their materials that they needed to get turned in. And we broke it down by subject area, so they can just put a check mark in there whenever they completed something. And this wasn't anything that we graded, just simply for students to stay organized. And for our math department, to keep students engaged, we decided to use our own variation of the student choice board, and giving students a lot of options in how they wanted to learn and move on with our materials. So option 1, students had the Khan Academy option, where they could watch instructional videos and do the practice there. Khan Academy is a great resource. And then also, as our 7th grade math PLC, we created instructional videos from our team, and students were able to use the different methods that we talked about in class. For option 2, students could watch those teacher videos and then complete some IXL topic areas connected. And then option number 3, students could watch those same video from the teachers, and then they had the option of doing kind of like a story or game mode type review to get them through as well. With the story mode reviews, I also created some interactive websites for students. So during weeks 1 and 2, students reviewed all of the IM units 1 through 6 that we covered prior to going on our coronacation, as I call it, at school. But they were, I don't know if we have time. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to mute myself because I can hear my dogs barking. My bad. Technical difficulties today. These are interactive websites, and students were given worksheets to follow along. And I know Maddie really likes the Harry Potter one, so I'm sure she's going to click on that one. So I created these interactive websites, and each tab or page that students visit is a review of each unit that we covered prior to it. So the first one that she clicked on here is Green Dots Bank, and something that we cover in 7th grade is changing from positive and negative numbers using a number line. So if you know anything about Harry Potter, you know that the vaults go really far down into the ground, and then they also have a bank above ground level. So using that change in elevation to represent positive and negative numbers were one of the things that I pointed out specifically. And then the second huge thing in 7th grade math is applying percentages to real world context. So I created a shopping list where students have to go shopping at Diagon Alley and buy different materials and things they need for the upcoming school year. And then they have a coupon page where they have to apply percentages for discounts and coupons, and also apply taxes for the different stores. And like I said, applying percentages is something huge in 7th grade that they learn how to do, especially applying to real world context as well, and my fantasy world context too, I guess.
That is amazing. I bet your kids love that. My kids would like to do that right now. Very cool.
Yeah, they really, really enjoyed it, especially the Fortnite one. I can't tell you how many of my 23 students did the Fortnite review, because that's what all middle schoolers love right now.
Yes, they do. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle. I'm glad that worked out for you to get on and share your work with us. I love hearing how you are engaging your students with things that interest them and giving them choice. Next, we're going to move to an ELA example from Frederick Olmsted Academy South. I believe Sarah Bryant is on the line.
Yes, thank you. So at OAS, we decided to make the choice boards provided by JCPS our primary focus of NTI. So regardless of whether a student is in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, and regardless of their access to technology, the requirement is the same for all students. They're expected to read for 20 minutes a day and complete 4 choice board activities a week, in addition to their related arts work. We're using this system to simplify communication and to make sure that all students are receiving high-level quality instruction. In addition to this overall requirement, we've created an OAS extension site, which allows students to engage in learning on their own terms. Teachers have created special Google Classrooms to host what are essentially like after-school clubs. Students can freely choose topics that interest them, regardless of what grade level they're in and what teacher is hosting the club. This allows us to build relationships across all grade levels, and it increases student engagement because they're choosing the activity they want, and they're even allowed to tell a teacher that they think we should host a club, just like at normal school. So how does the choice board requirement work? We go on to the next slide. Each week, grade levels divide the activities on the weekly choice board by core content area. And then PLCs work together to create scaffolding materials, models, and lessons for each activity that they're sponsoring. So for example, on choice board number 2, one of the activities that ELA sponsored in 8th grade was an activity called Poem or Song Lyrics Analysis. So my PLC, since we were sponsoring this activity, we each had a spot for this activity to be turned in our Google Classroom. And then attached to that, we had the rubric, a think aloud model, and then scaffolding materials to support them. But yeah, we broke it down step by step. And this is a model that I created. And there's a video attached in the first slide there that shows like how to actually go through and do it. Let's see. So the single point rubric that we use, that was really beneficial. That was Miss Erin Yates' idea. And that helped us to provide stronger, effective feedback because it gave us the ability to hone in on our essential standards and what we were looking for in particular. So even when the activities were focused on music or health, which my PLC and I have no formal training on, we're able to establish clear expectations that still align to our content area standards. So the interdisciplinary choice boards give students the opportunity to see how their skill sets in other classes apply across all content areas. There are many benefits to the system, but overall, I think the three best are that it allows teachers to experience that interdisciplinary model, like working with different activities. And we might not have had the opportunity, or like we might have been more hesitant to do that if we weren't giving this this experience. So also, we have been able to become experts on just a few activities each week, which I think improves our instruction, but there's still an ample amount of student choice because they have nearly a dozen activities to choose from each week, but the teachers are really focused on just a few, which allows us to be more effective in our feedback and allows us to produce stronger scaffolding and models. We're also able to be just as engaged in the work that students are doing at home without technology because it's the same work that students are doing digitally. So when we talk on the phone or when they call a friend to work on an assignment together, the expectations are achievable and clearly set across the board. As far as implications for future lesson design, we've touched on several of these points, but I did just want to mention a few. Student self-pacing. The feedback we're getting from students is that being able to work at their own speed and check in when they really need help is really working for them. Now, as a teacher who regularly utilizes the workshop model, I'm trying to figure out what works in the NTI setting that doesn't work in the classroom. And I think the difference is just being surrounded by your peers, which I can completely understand. But I'm not sure yet how we counter that. In the classroom, I think it's probably going to involve having like Google Meet office hours after school where they can kind of catch up if they got off task in the classroom. Standards-based grading is the way to go. Technology 101, we need to be really intentional with making sure that all of our students know how to use the technology and the resources that are available within it. Opportunities for self-expression, build engagement, and finally, the relationships are everything. Even more than just students will work for you when they know you care. We also need to help them build a positive relationship with their learning and help them find their own why.
Great, thank you, Sarah, for all of that. So we've seen a couple of themes running through the three teachers we've heard from so far. Very interdisciplinary, student-centered, and grounded in engagement with kids. What is going to really resonate with them? And now we're going to shift to high school, which is sometimes seen as a bit more challenging. And we're going to hear from science teacher Caleb Johnson from Central High School.
Hi, thanks for having me on. Yeah, more challenging. It's tough to get people to agree on things, I feel like, in high school a lot of times, because we get so siloed and so kind of set in our ways. Like chemistry has to look this way, biology has to look this way. So the first thing we actually had to figure out at Central was, what are we going to do with NTI? There's this whole idea, so if we go to the next slide, that we have to teach all our standards, that we have to spend hours studying all the minutiae of science, all these little details. And that kind of, we have to let go a little bit so that we can really make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students. And so we settled on just continue learning is what we kept hearing. And so what does that look like? Well, we came up with these interdisciplinary choice boards that we have heard so much about. And I got to say, not a lot. People were a little hesitant at first, myself included. But the more I dug into it, the more I found that when I took my standard out of the center of this board and really put in a compelling question, something that was going to make my students scratch their head and think, I found that it became a lot easier to make this. I found that it provided a lot of structure for what my students wanted to do, and we'll talk about this a little later. But once again, the student interest was just unbeatable. So if we go to the next slide, you can take a look at what this compelling question kind of looks like. One of my standard boards that we would have talked about in chemistry would have been material science and how the structure and organization of the molecular level affects properties of these things, of these compounds. And so we focus on polymers and plastics. I know a lot of people are focusing on metals if you have metal programming school. But the idea that I chose to focus on instead is, why is Earth's waste management in crisis? That's a tough question to answer for anybody. And it might even, ignite some future budding scientists in my students. It might ignite something in them, because this is a question that's relevant. It's real world. And so you can see just some features of this. I've got across the top, those are our high quality core instruction kind of big rocks. These are things that we say all students should be able to demonstrate by the time they graduate. So I came up with a compelling question, and then I thought about the product. How can I get my students to be advocates, to be empathic citizens, thoughtful researchers, global leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where you see those little notifications, those little icons around my choice board as well. I did require one assignment, and I have suggested my students, if you want to get an A+, then you need to do 3 of these just to give breadth. They're designed to be shorter, more manageable, so that they have more options. That was in my mind. We're always just trying to make it digestible for them almost. They've got a lot going on in their lives. Students are sharing laptops, sharing things. And so I wanted to make it as functional as possible. So my next question here is, why is water so special to life on Earth, not some other substance? This would normally be a whole unit on water special properties and intermolecular forces. So I chose to tune into one thing that they'll need for biology next year, the hydrogen bonding, just so that we can just get the fundamentals and then see how it applies to all aspects of their life. So we can take a look at just maybe one of those student exemplars up there. If we see, this is the work that they're turning in. These are just, average run-of-the-mill students, and I'm just shocked and blown away by what they've turned in. I've got a PowerPoint slide with each task on a different slide. They're drawing things, they're putting them in there. They went on a socially distant walk around their house to find examples of weathering and erosion. And like I said here, feedback is another key. These weren't perfect, but that's their starting points. This conversation, I would go back, I would tag things, I would comment, and ask my students to improve their work. So going forward in the future, go back to the slide, I am definitely looking forward to using these next year for exactly like this. I'm a scientist, I'm data driven, and I give a weekly reflection survey to try and see where my students are at, how they're coming along, whether they're feeling overwhelmed. I want to try and reach them as best I can. And this was one of the questions on there. I asked whether my choice boards were interesting and educational, and I wouldn't get that response even in a normal classroom. So I'm already thinking next year, how can I use this to further engage my students? There's over 75% said yeah. And I did not pay a student to say that quote either, promise. So yeah, I was kind of blown away by the effectiveness of this interdisciplinary approach, and looking forward to using it in the future.
I'd just like to say that all the work you all have shown today is very impressive. And I love that every single one of you has mentioned how you're going to continue forward with this when you return to the physical classroom. That's great.
Thanks, Suzanne. Would you like to wrap us up?
Yes. So this is our final third 3 of 3 presentation around these great exemplars from the field, and we just appreciate all of these teachers being willing to share their wonderful work. And I think the 3 major takeaways that we're thinking about is how in all of these cases, schools and teachers and teams have put students and families at the center of their instructional design, their curriculum design, and just the way they're designing NTIs. So they started experience, and they started with the experience of students. They considered equity, they iterated quickly, and also these teachers have shown great leadership, and they were trusted trusted to lead this work in their schools, and they've definitely delivered for families in the community. So we just appreciate you all so much. Thank you, and we look forward to how this might look in the classroom in the coming year, and all the ways that this work can be imagined and reimagined in other classrooms, virtually and physically in our district.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'm sure your students really appreciate what you're doing for them, the parents as well. I really enjoyed that session.
Thank you.
Hey, Avon. Hey, Kanita. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. So while that presentation was going on, I did not see it in the trainer link. I saw it on the YouTube channel, but I did not.
Yeah, that's fine. As long as we are live on the YouTube channel, that's good.
Okay.
So yes,
Okay.
I am here with Kanita and Avon. Welcome back. That was we shared a session from earlier on the YouTube channel. But I will go ahead, and who's going to present first?
It's me presenting for Avon and myself.
Okay, great. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'm going to go ahead and turn captions on.
That would be great. And there's a drop down next to captions. If you could make the text large, would be great, please.
Text.
Text size. There you go. Great. Thank you. Looks good.
Okay. Avon, whenever you're ready.
All right, guys, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Today, Kanita and I are going to be talking through some strategies for foundational skills to be queer inclusive in the classroom and in your school buildings. So if Kanita, you will go to the next slide. For anyone joining us, my name is Avon Cook. I am the high school DEP resource teacher, and I will let Kanita introduce herself.
And I am Kanita Ballard. I am the DEP resource teacher for AAS elementary schools, but I also chair the district-wide LGBT advisory committee.
So today we wanted to talk, and this is part one of a two-part session. Tomorrow we're going to be back on at 11:30 with a follow-up. So for today, we really only have two distinct goals. We want everyone to walk away from this understanding the nuances between identity, sex, attraction, and gender expression. We also want to make sure that we give you all the ability to address in appropriate terms anyone who classifies themselves as LGBTQ, and then the vocabulary that you need to discuss issues that are directly related to the LGBTQ community. So those are our two session goals over the next 25-ish minutes. If you are participating with us in the chat, couple of session norms to be mindful of and things to keep in mind as you wade into this work, especially if you've never done cultural competency or equity work before. Kanita and I ask that you be present, that you assume good intentions. So we will be monitoring the chat between the three of us. So if you have a question, please feel free to ask. We are here to help you understand, and we just ask that you assume good intentions of anyone else. Give respect. Everyone is working through this from their own lens and their own lived experience. And then, of course, the most important one, be comfortable with discomfort. We only have 30 minutes with you today and another 30 tomorrow. We're going to be covering some essential things to know, but this work will in no way be finished when you end this session. And that goes for almost anything regarding culture or equity. Kanita, anything to add?
Not at all, but if you have questions past today and tomorrow's session, again, our contact information is available throughout this presentation, so please reach out so that we can support you all.
So, if you are at all familiar with privilege surveys, it's pretty common in equity work. There is a survey and it's linked there, the heteronormative survey. And we wanted to talk through a couple of questions on it and what that could mean in terms of growth. So, if Kanita, you will go one more slide for me. Thank you. So this was taken from work done by a researcher and published through the Gender and Sexuality Center back in the 1970s. But if you look and you're familiar with privilege surveys, you'll notice some alignment of the questions. So, for example, what do you think caused your heterosexuality? When and how did you first decide you were a heterosexual? So, when we think about these questions couched in the understanding of LGBTQ students and their experiences, or perhaps students who are heterosexual but whose family members are part of the LGBTQ community, it kind of gives us a way of thinking through our own privilege and our own biases. If you are part of the dominant or normative culture, the assumption is that that is standard for everyone else when that is not necessarily the case. So when we're thinking about gender and sexuality and how those interact in the classroom and what we can be doing to be cognizant of how we're approaching students and their families and the larger community, these are things that will kind of push on your own understanding of where gender and sexuality kind of intersect. So, when we talk about LGBTQ, a lot of people fail to realize that there are a lot more labels and identifiers out there. Um, so, the couple that I want to speak to, and then Kanita, if you have anything to add, please do. A lot of people fail to realize that one of the A's in the big long acronym is ally. I know a lot of elementary and middle school teachers aren't necessarily comfortable with the idea of approaching subjects of gender or gender expression in the classroom, but it becomes really important to ensure equity with students, that we are teaching kids early and often that there are lots of different people in the world and that all of it is okay and that all of it should be treated with respect and with understanding. The other two that I want to hit on is HIV affected, which is a subset within the LGBTQ community. Here in Louisville, we've been doing a lot more work in the last years around making strides with that and making people aware of resources available to them in the community. The other that I will speak to very, very briefly is Two-Spirit, which is an umbrella term within the Native American culture, and it encapsulates a person who has both male and female spirits within them. There's a lot more to that, and it's a lot more dense in understanding. But because that is not my culture or my lived experience, I don't want to speak to it because I'm not an expert. Kanita, are there any terms here that you want to speak on?
Well, I'll just make this general statement that when we're talking about the what does it all mean as it applies to this very large community, we have to be able to practice and engage with the skills of listening and inquiry, because some of these terms are applicable and some of these terms aren't, depending on the individual. So, for example, queer is not a term that is embraced by the whole of the community. There are pockets and individuals within the community that will speak to having a queer identity and using that as part of their labeling. But then there are other parts of the community and individuals that do not wish to be associated with that term. So we really have to be critical thinkers and listeners and askers as it concerns finding out how do people want to identify.
And then, Kanita, if you would for me, could you click on that hyperlink?
Yes.
So what we've linked here for you all is a glossary that is from Teaching Tolerance, and it goes through all the different terms that you may or may not hear. As Kanita said, there are terms that some people within the community will adopt, and there are others that have fallen out of favor. But the main thing is that we are being open and that we are being inquisitive and accepting, exactly like Kanita said. Asking is much better than assuming. And as you will go through this resource, you'll see that there are a lot of terms that we didn't hit on. but that is there for your perusal. And if you have any direct questions, please do not hesitate to ask. As Kanita said, we are here to help. So if any of this feels confusing or feels off, let us know. This interface is not the best for this type of work, but we're going to make the best of it. So one of the things that we have referred to briefly is this idea of gender, right? And gender constructs. So when we talk about gender identity, we tend to talk about a person's internal sense of being female, being male, or being something else altogether. But very frequently, especially in American culture, we equate sex and gender as the same thing. So if you have a female student who does not identify as female, their gender expression is more masculine, or their gender identity is in fact male, he, him, his, we tend to have difficulty in our American society understanding that, because we equate a person's sex when they're born with the gender that they will assume. But gender identity and gender expression is fluid, it's multifaceted, and there's a lot of things going on socially that helps us construct that. I mentioned earlier that I know a lot of elementary school teachers aren't necessarily comfortable addressing the idea of gender in the classroom, but because it is such an innate part of American culture that we equate a child's sex to their assumed gender, it's really important that we start developing in kids young this understanding that gender is not binary. Gender can be many things, and that we have social constructions and assumptions around what it should be, but that it's not always necessarily the case. Kanita, anything to add?
Well, and just when we enforce a specific narrative of that there is this binary, we can actually contribute to more harm than good. And so we'll oftentimes see within students that identify as trans, we'll see these common themes, these common narratives of students who found themselves in school experiencing suicidal ideation, bullying, just extreme bouts of depression, because they did not necessarily have support or understanding, and something that was furthering their disconnect between their identity and their expression because of the school. So we can also approach this from a holistic standpoint, in that we as the institution of school and we as teachers, we can be advocates for our student, and we can have inclusive practices to really support the social emotional identity and development of our learners as it pertains to how they see themselves and express themselves as it applies to their gender expression and their gender identity. And in the next slide, we're going to have more information about how that gender binary is harmful. So go ahead and take it away, Aiden.
So for those of you kind of struggling to delineate between sex and gender, or gender expression or gender identity, I know we are throwing a lot of terms at you. So again, if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask. We're here to answer them. But for those of you who are struggling to wrap your head around what is the difference between a person's sex and a person's gender, if you think about a close friend finding out that they are soon to be parents, one of the first questions that we tend to ask is it a boy or is it a girl? When really we are asking about the sex of the child. But from a very young age, we condition children to fall into this gender binary. Girls are associated with dolls, the color pink. If a girl is very demanding or forthright, she's much more likely to be labeled bossy rather than she's a leader. She's a natural born leader. And the same thing can be said of boys. We tend to think of the color blue, tools and trucks. They don't really get encouraged to play with dolls or anything else of that nature, because that would be considered feminine. At the same time, it's also where you get some harmful phrases like boys will be boys. So when we think about what Kanita said, how we are nurturing kids in a way that is healthy for them, this isn't just going to apply to our kids who may identify as trans or who may grow to identify as part of the LGBTQ community. When we put kids in these boxes according to the gender binary, we're also telling them that they can only be one way. So when we learn to talk through that with kids when they're young, they grow up to be adolescents and teenagers who are very well versed in their own understanding and their own gender identity and expression, but they're also more accepting of people who may be outliers. So you will see less confusion around females who are also doctors. You have a lot of scripted stereotypes that you can pull from just 20 years ago, and you can see where the gender binary breaks down, and what we deem perfectly normal today may have been extremely abnormal in the 1950s. So tracking it through time is also very useful if you're trying to break down that gender binary versus biological sex. Kenita, anything to add here?
No, other than the next slide is one of my favorite slides because it's a visual representation and organization of some of the concepts that we're speaking to.
So if you are a visual learner, this is definitely for you. So everything you'll notice exists on a scale that can basically be described as masculine to feminine, or feminine to masculine, however you want to say it. So when we talk about your gender expression, we are talking about the outward appearance, how you dress, what types of clothing you prefer, how you present yourself to the world. Typically, people express their gender in a way that matches their gender identity, which is how you define and see yourself and how you understand yourself through this optic of gender, which can exist in a non-binary state. Attraction and sex are very, very different. People tend to shy away, again, with younger children, from talking about issues within the LGBTQ community because they don't want to confuse it with sex, when really we're not talking about biological sex. We're talking about attraction, we're talking about love, we're talking about who you choose to spend your life with. So if you are a visual learner, this may also help you kind of break down where we're talking about things. And today we are rooted very deeply in this understanding of gender identity, gender expression, and how we can kind of break down gender binaries in our classroom. Tomorrow, we are also going to be talking about, as Kenita alluded to earlier, what happens when we as teachers aren't being advocates and aren't being allies to the LGBTQ community.
And also one thing to point out is that we really have to step back from this idea of a binary of male, female, because ultimately it does not make sense. Because something like a gender identity and a gender expression, there's fluidity within those identities. And we have seen that within our own pop culture figures with someone like Prince and Little Richard, figures who had fluidity in their gender expression, even though their biological sex was male, even though their gender identity fluctuated between more womanness or manness, depending on them. But we really have to take a step back from this is what men look like and this is what women look like, because it's nothing as concrete as that. It's something that can ebb and flow.
I really like that graphic. Coming from the elementary education world, I was thinking like, yeah, how do I address this? But seeing attraction and sex as two different things, I'm like, yes, an elementary teacher can discuss attraction. So thank you. That's a great graphic.
And please reach out to Avon, myself, or Monica, as we also do have additional resources specific to elementary schools, as well as LGBT book list for what are elementary appropriate LGBT picture books and chapter books to include in the classroom. But Avon, go ahead and take it away from approaching inclusive language, an example.
So I have to give a huge shout out to our fellow RT, Rachel Klein. She shared this with us. This is just one example. This is from a JCPS middle school of how we can have inclusive language in a very simplistic way. So you can see this says Student Bill of Rights, and I wanted to highlight a couple of these in particular. So one, to be called only by your given or chosen name. So making sure that students understand the importance of referring to someone by the name that they have chosen for themselves to be known in that classroom environment, to be treated with respect and dignity by the school community as a whole. That means all aspects of your identity are affirmed, you are seen as an individual, and you are given the resources that you need to succeed within that classroom. 11 is just, it kind of makes my teacher heart happy to be included. There are very few students who strive to not be seen in a school day. For a lot of our kids, especially those in marginalized spaces, coming to school, connecting with a teacher can be something that is a lifeline of sorts for them. And again, we're going to get into that a bit more tomorrow in terms of things to watch for, things to look for, because we know that this group experiences a lot more adverse childhood experiences than the average. And then, of course, 14, not to be teased for being different, because at the end of the day, our perception of different is based entirely on dominant normative culture. So if you think back to the heteronormative survey of when did you first realize you were heterosexual, that isn't a question that you would expect from another person, because being heterosexual is seen as normal and everything else is seen as different or other. And depending on who you are, you may be seen as problematic for identifying in those ways. But we as teachers can be advocates and allies by understanding that what is different is simply defined as anything that is not the dominant culture. So those are voices and communities to amplify, to listen to learn from, and to protect when we can. One of the easiest ways, and we're going to do some exploring here in a second. So one of the easiest things that you can do as a first step, especially if you are in the classroom, is practicing speak up strategies. So I know, having been in high schools, I will hear kids call each other out of their name in the hallway. And even though they are not arguing, it's not going to lead to a fight, there are certain phrases that it will trigger me. And my kids got to know very quickly what things would get them into a lot of trouble with me. And the thing they hated most was when I went on lectures. So becoming comfortable with a term that just kind of stops everything. Asking a student, well, what do you mean by that? Tell me more about that. Why do you think that? And depending on your teaching style, you're going to find a phrase that suits you better than others. My favorite was just acting extremely confused and asking a kid, what do you mean? And it gets you quite far with adults as well. So learning to interject yourself into those moments, because you never know who's in your classroom and you never know who's listening. And again, we aren't just talking about this through the lens of LGBTQ students. If you're an elementary or middle school teacher, your student may be in a home environment where their parents identify as LGBTQ. So learning to take those moments that feel uncomfortable and creating teachable moments around them is really important. Kanita, if you would click on Speak Up Strategies. So what we've done is embedded some more resources, and I think off this slide, most of them are from Teaching Tolerance, and they are going to walk you through just some things to think about and some things to look for within the classroom setting. Kanita, I'm having issues with my screen. Can you talk us through what you're looking at right now?
Okay, so essentially the Speak Up Strategies is it's a catch-all resource for how to respond and engage and disrupt prejudice, bias, and stereotypes. And so that guide will walk you through not only how to implement these strategies as a teacher, but through a variety of role groups as well, from counselor to administrators, as well as how to support students and using speak up strategies to be disruptors of bias themselves. Because the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want advocacy and support to be solely on our teachers. It takes an all hands on deck approach to really, again, be disruptors and prejudice, bias, and stereotypes. And similarly, we do have from Teaching Tolerance as well another guide for best practices for serving LGBT students. And I will say that this is another resource from Teaching Tolerance. This is applicable to the physical classroom, but there are resources in here as well and strategies in here that apply to our current situation as well. In fact, Teaching Tolerance does have a specific resource for how to support LGBT learners in distant learning environments as well as during COVID. Because one thing that we have to keep in mind is that some of our learners are coming from places where school was their safe place and space. And home was not necessarily that for them, given their identity. So we want to be able to continue that for them, making sure that they still have access to a safe place and space. And so those are those resources. And we're going to go ahead and conclude. Are there any questions that we still have around ideology or terminology? Are there any inquiries as to what other types of additional resources are out there? Because we tend to see a tendency for elementary schools to put off engaging with LGBT populations for the middle school and high school. But again, we want to be able to have the most inclusive places and spaces that we can. That's the classroom. And we have students that might identify as cis, so that they were born a female. They see themselves as a female, but they have family members that are part of the community. So again, we want to make sure that we're not putting barriers for our families or our learners to be their most authentic selves. Also, what are some takeaways that you have from today's sessions? What are your next steps? And then ultimately, how can we help you take that next step?
I've been monitoring the chat, and we have a lot of people interested. I don't see any questions at this time for you to address. One thing I was thinking about, like I said, I come from the elementary world. I have noticed recently our library media specialists are doing a great job about getting books out there and getting them displayed so that kids are like, oh, that kind of interests me. I'll check that out. So I've been very proud of what I've seen in the libraries. Yes.
Definitely. One of the things I loved about being an English teacher is the level of empathy you can help students build through books, simply by exposing them to something that is not normal for them, but is in fact perfectly normal. To add on to what Kenita said, I think it was less than a week ago, we are seeing gay men being targeted in pockets of places where they are doing heavy testing for corona. And it kind of likens back to similar issues in the LGBTQ community. So just being very aware of, as we are all experiencing this global pandemic, and it's not easy on anyone, this is a very difficult time, there are groups of people who are going to be further marginalized. So when we enter back into classrooms, we want to make sure that we equip any teacher who is willing and able to best serve their students and to create a welcoming and inclusive environment for all students and their families. Because again, you may not have students that are out or who are comfortable being out in your building, but they may have LGBTQ family members that they go home to at the end of the day. So finding a balance between creating that safe space, but also creating space for conversations is really what we are hoping the takeaway will be here.
And tomorrow we're going to go more into those nuances of what steps you can take, as well as to what are some of the specific implications of engaging or disengaging with LGBT learners and populations within the school. But we're also going to be speaking to the intersectionality component of this conversation, because we also have to keep in mind that we have students that have intersectional identities, and when they're being oppressed for their external identity of being a brown person of color, woman person of color, male person of color, their internal identities can also come under attack. And so what we don't want to, again, is we don't want to contribute to harmful practices. We don't want to contribute to disconnecting our students from themselves.
Agreed. Kenita,
yes.
Will you go just one more slide? I want you to send this off and finish this out, but I didn't want to forget this.
Yes. Thank you. And so one step that the district is trying to take as a whole is trying to shift their culture and climate to be inclusive and supportive of LGBT learners, but also our LGBT JCPS staff and family. So we are currently forming a LGBT employee resource group. It is open to new staff. It is open to current staff, but this is a employee-led network that is open to any and all that are part of the community or interested in supporting the community. And so we are having a JCPS virtual event on May 20th, 2020 at 4 p.m. on Google Meet. And so JCPS Pride is the code. And again, you can also see this being retweeted on Twitter. You can also find this, I believe, was it the JCPS forward?
Yes.
You'll see this in a number of publications, but the invite is standing and it is open to all staff that are supportive of the community. So we hope to see faces there. Well, not there, but virtually. And so with that, as it is 12, we're going to go ahead and close out. But again, any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to Avon Cook or Kenita Ballard, and we'd be more than happy to support you all.
There was a question come in at the end. Just teachers wondering if they can get. Is there a list of resources about books they can use?
Yes. And so if you contact schools also have LGBT support coaches, but given that we're not in physical places and spaces with our teachers and our support coaches, they had the LGBT book list, but please contact me and I'd be more than happy to get that out to you. As well as possibly finding who is the name of your LGBT support coach, because our LGBT support coaches at each school has a number of resources for how to work with families, how to support trans students, et cetera, et cetera.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Avon. Thank you, Kenita. Great information. We're glad to have you here supporting the staff and students of JCPS. And
we will see you all tomorrow.
All right. Sounds great. I'm Stephen Durham with the JCPS Digital Innovation Team. We are going to take a break now for lunch. We will be back with live programming today at 1 o'clock. I hope everybody enjoys their lunch. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you.